Rev up your engines!
Well, here's something I didn't see coming. Now, Honda and Nissan are talking about a merger. And since they talked about it, Nissan shares had their best day in 40 years. Because if one bad company looks like they're going to be bought by a bigger company, guess what happens? The stock of the bad company normally goes up, and the stock of the good company goes down. And of course, that's what happened. Nissan shares surged 24%, but Honda shares slipped 3%. Now realize Nissan, even with that addition, is only $5 a share. Honda's $25 a share, but that doesn't show that if there's so many more shares of Honda out there than Nissan, and Honda's floating along pretty well. Nissan's on the verge of bankruptcy. I don't understand why Honda would get involved in taking over Nissan unless they want to pick and choose in certain areas. A lot of the tiny Nissan cars do big in Asia. Maybe they want to buy a certain area, like when Kmart and Sears merged. The reason they did is because there was a bunch of property in California that was worth money. So when they merged that property, they sold the stores and they got money for the property. They got a fortune for the property in California. So it was really a property deal more than a business deal between Sears and Kmart, thinking they're going to bring their stores back, which they aren't, right? In this case, who knows? Maybe Honda's got the idea, well, we can make money in Asia, maybe make a little money over here in South America, and then we'll just shut all the other Nissan plants down. Who knows what the idea is? From an outsider's perspective, it looks stupid because you got a good company, Honda, versus a crappy company, Nissan. You'd think, why would one want to take over the other? But there could be a lot of underlying reasons. They could be buying Nissan, like I said, and just gutting the company, seeing what's profitable, keep that, and then just throw the rest down the garbage can, which often happens when companies merge. Well, you can't make this up. A California company just recalled over 540,000 snow tires because of lack of traction in the snow. Now, they call it a California company, but it is the Brinks Qinshan Tire North America. So it is a Chinese tire company, but they're doing business here in the United States. If you own one of these, they're recalling the Fortune Tormenta and the Brinks High Country. Could you imagine calling a tire the Fortune Tormenta? I don't think I'd want a tire that's called Tormenta. It's like it's tormenting me. It doesn't work. It gets flats all the time. The Chinese, maybe they should have hired an American to name their tires instead of thinking of these crazy names themselves. Now, the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration said these tires are labeled as snow tires but lack sufficient traction to perform in all snow weather conditions. They are recalling 541,632 of these tires. Now, you're not going to be notified until February 1st, okay? This is still December as of when making of this video. Why they got to wait so long before they warn people? Hey, between now and February 1st, you usually get a lot of snow, right? Oh, well, they didn't warn me. The tires aren't working right. I don't understand how these laws work, but it's got to be absolutely hilarious. I warn people, don't buy Chinese tires, right? I warn people, do not buy them. Do not buy them. No quality. Well, in this case, they're selling snow tires, but they got one real problem. They don't work very well in the snow. Well, GM has another big recall. This is of their electric Equinox EV, but it's not what you normally would think. They're recalling them because they don't make enough noise. Now, normally when you buy a new vehicle, and these are 2025 Chevy Equinox, brand new, you don't want them to make noise. But electric cars, by law, when they're going at lower speeds, have to make noise to warn pedestrians. Now, from my perspective, they let them have too much freedom with what type of noise they can make, because I've seen them. Some hum like angels. Some make different noises. Hey, cars that have engines in them all make the same basic noise. Why didn't they just force them to make that same basic noise when they're going slow so people know it's a car? Because I've been walking in cities with people and they look at me and they say, what's that? I said, well, that's an electric car over there. By law, they have to make noise. But that person did not know that that was an electric car coming because they didn't know what that humming noise was. And in the case of these brand new Chevy electric vehicles, the noise, they said, wasn't loud enough to warn pedestrians. So you got to bring your EV in and they got to turn up the noise to make them make more noise. Imagine that. You buy a new car and it's too quiet. Sorry, we made it too quiet. We got to make it make more noise. But they do. And truthfully, like I just explained, I don't understand why it isn't law that they have to sound like a car. Because, I mean, they can make all kinds of noise. And if they're playing these little symphonies of singing angels, a lot of people, they don't know it's a car. And it's not really warning them that it's a car, right? They should have a standardized car noise that they all have to make. It would be logical, but then again, government never does anything that's logical, so that's probably never going to happen. Well, I always warn people about buying electric vehicles in cold climates. Well, here's an email from someone who did. And they're pretty much saying they understand what I was talking about. Patrick Feeney says, I have a Cybertruck. I left it unplugged one night, not charging, and it lost 20% of its charge in 12 hours just sitting there. It was about 5 degrees that night. We'll see what happens when it's 20 degrees below. Keep up the good work, Patrick. Imagine if you parked your regular car that's full of gas, and then you get up in the morning, and now 20% of that gasoline is gone. And you might wonder, how does this happen? Well, all those batteries that are in the vehicles as they stand today, which is the reason I tell people don't buy an electric vehicle. Maybe the technology will be better in the future. But the liquid electrolyte will freeze and the batteries will be destroyed. So the batteries have to use their own energy to heat themselves up, to keep the system warm, or the batteries will freeze and then they break. So maybe, especially if you live in a cold area, not a smart idea to buy an electric vehicle. Unless you didn't have it plugged in, right? Well, leave it plugged in, okay? But then, a lot of these things start on fire while they're plugged in. So, although you may be saving the energy in your Cybertruck, maybe it will burn your house down while it's charging while you sleep, so it doesn't use all the electricity in the battery up to keep the battery from freezing. And why it's a stupid idea to buy one as they stand today. Well, I tell people stay away from dealerships. Well, this guy found out why. A guy in Humble, Texas says, this is one of the biggest scams in the automotive industry. Toyota dealership quoted me $8,600 for a repair. I fixed it for $50. So I takes his Toyota to the Humble dealership in Humble, Texas. And I always wondered, why do they call it Humble? It's Humble, right? But for some reason, Texans pronounce it Humble instead of Humble. But they pronounce Houston, Houston, and that's Houston, which if they wanted to pronounce it like they did Humble, it would be Houston. That's what they say in England. They have Houston Street in England, but they call it Houston. I don't understand any of it, but regardless, guy goes in, they tell him you got to spend all this money. So he goes and he buys $50 of oil and filter, changes the transmission fluid, and now his truck works fine. And he was really mad at him too, because previously he went to the dealership to get a new catalytic converter if his was stolen. When he took his car to the dealership, he said they put the cheapest one and made it so poorly that now it's fallen off. They used the cheapest ones, and they didn't put them on properly. This is how scumbaggy they are. I'm sure it was stolen, so his insurance was paying for it, right? So he was paying, the insurance company should have put on a Toyota OEM catalytic converter. They cost a fortune. And he's claiming they put an aftermarket cheap one on. They didn't even weld it on right, which doesn't surprise me at all, because they want to make as much profit as possible. Put on the cheapest part and charge the most money. And of course, since it was an insurance job, you know how that goes. They're like, well, it's not his money. What does he care what we put on it? We'll just put the cheap one on them. But it's the reason I tell people don't go to dealerships. I mean, they wanted all that money. They, of course, tried to sell them a transmission and didn't say, well, you could try this first. You know, understand one thing about dealerships. Most of them have overheads of millions every year. Before they make a profit, they have to pay the overhead. So that means you as a customer have to pay their maybe $2-3 million overhead every year before they make a profit. So, of course, they're going to try to sell you everything, including the kitchen sink. That's how those businesses work. So my advice, avoid them if at all possible. Here's one that I can't help but laugh at. Driverless bus service in Scotland to be withdrawn due to lack of interest. Okay, the Scottish, note it provenes frugal. I have Scottish relatives. They're supposed to be very frugal, right? They had autonomous buses run by the Stagecoach. Since May 2023, it's supposed to relieve heavy congestion. So it hasn't been that long, a little over a year, right? It cost £6 million, which is like almost $7 million, I guess, to set this thing up. And it was, of course, mainly funded by the government of England, government money waste. They had a fleet of 5 single-decker buses that they claim could carry 10,000 passengers a week, but they have to have 2 crew on board for safety reasons. So what's the point of having a self-driving bus if you have to have 2 crew members? That's plain stupidity, right? It turns out that hardly anybody was using it, so they shut it down. There's more than just the electric self-driving bus thing behind this, because listen, they're giving away free bus passes to all under 22s and over 60s. And the over 60s aren't going on the buses because they don't like these youngsters being rowdy and throwing stuff around. Be careful what you ask for, right? The old people wanted free bus passes. They got them, but now they're not riding on this bus because, hey, the young people are creating a ruckus and they don't like it. So now they're canceling the self-driving thing that cost all that money because enough people aren't riding on the things. Does these people even think of the ramification of their policies? Well, we'll give free bus passes to the under 22s and over 60s. There's 2 groups that are going to fit in really well. No, maybe not. So if you never want to miss another one of my new car repair videos, remember to ring that bell.